Hello, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the eve of December 2nd, 2023 in the United States, the morning of December 3rd, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, as the truce broke down 2 days ago, there has been no more hostage exchanges. What is going on, however, is that the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, are continuing to release updated information from intelligence that has been gathered from the hostages that were released during the truce, as well as from other intelligence that was recovered during the truce. According to the update from the last 24 hours, there are currently 136 hostages that are identified in the Gaza Strip. Lieutenant Colonel Asaf Hamami, who is an IDF commander of the Southern Division of the Gaza Strip, who was thought to have been kidnapped on October 7th, is now confirmed that he was in fact killed on October 7th, that his body was kidnapped, and that his body is held by Hamas. In turn, another Israeli citizen who was thought to have been dead has been confirmed that he is kidnapped and held by the organization in the Gaza Strip. Regarding the potential of a future truce and hostage exchanges, Israel officially today ended the negotiations, with the head of the Mossad being ordered by the Prime Minister to recall his team from Qatar. According to reports, a low-level team of Israel remained behind in Qatar to allow opportunities for Hamas to agree to release any other women and children and buy itself another day of truce if it agrees to release, according to the terms of the deal, 10 more women and children. Hamas has stated that it has no more women and children in its possession and that it was willing to start negotiating release of older men in exchange for quote-unquote heavy Palestinian prisoners, i.e. Palestinian prisoners who are in jail either for murder or for many, many years. Israel in turn stated that it knows that Hamas has more than 10 women it could release, and recalled the team as a sign that it will not engage in any negotiations unless Hamas adheres to the original parameters of the criteria, i.e. releasing all women and children first. In Israel, there is a growing criticism from the freed hostages regarding the government's priorities now and the fact that negotiations have broken down. Many of the freed hostages have left their fathers, husbands, in some cases brothers, and in some other cases older children behind in captivity. Today there was a massive rally attended by tens of thousands of people in Tel Aviv in which some of the hostages that were released during the truce spoke. The hostages cited fear, hunger, and dreadful humanitarian conditions in which the captives are held in the Gaza Strip, and called on the government to prioritize releasing them over other goals of the war. Amidst this, Defense Minister in Israel Yoav Gallant and Prime Minister Netanyahu stated separately that as a way to secure the return of all hostages, mounting pressure must be leveled against Hamas, and the more the war is intensified, the more Hamas will be inclined to release more hostages. Related to this, Mohammed Nazal, who is a member of Hamas's political bureau, stated today that the organization will not release captured soldiers unless all Palestinian prisoners are released from Israeli prisons. Deputy leader of Hamas, Salah al-Aruri, stated in the Al Jazeera interview that the official stance of Hamas after the truce has broken down is that no more hostages will be exchanged and no one will be released until the war is over. He added that Hamas is willing to come to terms and deals about the exchange of dead bodies between the sides, however that Hamas would need more time to locate the Israeli bodies since many of them died in the Israeli bombings and are buried under the wreckage. He also insisted that Hamas has handed over all the women and children it has in its possession. Moving on to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were barrages of rockets and mortars fired into the southern parts and central parts of Israel in the last 24 hours. Rockets targeted the areas of Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gedera, Kfar Bilu, and Rehovot. There was also a substantial barrage towards Shfaran Gush Dan area, targeting Tel Aviv, Hulon, Modi'in, Yavne, Be'er Yaakov, Gezer. One person was injured from shrapnel. In addition, the IDF reported that it carried out over 400 bombings in the Gaza Strip throughout the last 24 hours. Various different Arab sources cited the substantial bombing in the southern city of Han Yunis, specifically in the Hamid area, and Al Jazeera reported that the bombings in Han Yunis centered on the eastern neighborhoods, which the IDF called on people to evacuate yesterday, and the coastal areas, primarily farmland. This is critically important because it resembles the same mode of operation that the IDF implemented in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. Prior to the ground invasion, there was substantial bombings from the air and artillery fire against substantial farmland area in order to, quote-unquote, pave the way and clear the path for the invasion to go through these territories. Now there is substantial bombing, according to Al Jazeera, being reported in the southern parts in Han Yunis, also in the farmland and the coastal areas, so this may be part of the IDF clearing the path for its impending ground invasion of the south. There are also reports of substantial bombings in the Jabalia area and several gun battles in the area as well. The IDF reported that it assassinated the Hamas brigade commander of Sajaiya, Wassim Farhat, and it is reported that he was one of the architects of October 7th. In addition, the IDF today released a video alluding to a series of assassinations, specifically naming people that the IDF had previously named on November 15th and November 16th that they may have been targets of the assassinations already then. The four people are Rohi Mushta, who is a member of Hamas's political bureau and a close associate of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip; Issam Da'alis, who's a member of Hamas' political bureau and also the Hamas prime minister in the Gaza Strip, and a co-associate of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas; Samach Leharaj, who is a Hamas political figure and a very close associate of Yahya Sinwar; and Ali Al-Amoudi, who's a member of Hamas's political bureau and head of communications. So the IDF had previously stated on November 15th and November 16th that it had targeted a building in which these four people were believed to be. There was no report from the IDF or Hamas about whether they were assassinated. Today the IDF put out a video specifically showing pictures of the four of them, citing where are they, why is Hamas worried about them. What this probably means is that the IDF thinks it managed to assassinate them and is trying to sow a lot of confusion. However, it is not confirmed that they are in fact dead. In addition, there are reports in Egypt about grave concerns regarding the IDF map that was published yesterday, where IDF divided Gaza into several different regions, much smaller regions, in order to allow Palestinians to evacuate one neighborhood after the other rather than a mass uprooting in the south. There is growing concern in Egypt that the plan of the IDF is to gradually push the Palestinians closer and closer to the border with Egypt. In addition, there was an interesting report just recently in the New York Times, quoting two Israeli sources, stating that Prime Minister Netanyahu is pressuring to find a way to assassinate Yahya Sinwar specifically, in the hopes that, I'm quoting, that could appease his coalition, silence his critics, and satisfy the population desperate for him to bring home the remaining hostages from Gaza and defeat Hamas. So in other words, this report is suggesting that Netanyahu is thinking if he manages to assassinate Yahya Sinwar, possibly this will be enough to appease the hawkish elements in his coalition, and maybe he'll be able to come to some sort of long-term ceasefire. Unclear at this time. Regarding casualties in the last 24 hours, one IDF soldier was reported to have been badly injured in northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Information Ministry is reporting that over 200 Palestinians have been killed since the truce collapsed, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 15,207, including 40,000 injured and more. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, there's a report in Arbi al-Jadid today that Egypt is considering allowing trucks to enter through the Rafah crossing without first being inspected in Israel's Nitzana crossing. So the way trucks are supposed to enter the Gaza Strip, they first go to the Nitzana crossing, there they're inspected by Israel, and then they're escorted to the Rafah crossing and go in. Israel is now considering bypassing the Israeli inspection, citing holdups at Nitzana due to meticulous inspections. Regarding trucks that actually did enter today, the Palestinian Red Crescent reported that the first trucks entered since the truce collapse. According to the Egyptian Al-Kahara Al-Akhbariya, this included 50 humanitarian aid trucks, i.e. trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies, as well as 2 fuel trucks. This matches the agreement prior to the truce regarding the entrance of fuel trucks. It is a substantially higher number than the trucks that were entering prior to the truce. Then it was 20 trucks a day. The reported number now is 50. Moving on to the West Bank, there was an attempted Palestinian attack against IDF soldiers at a checkpoint near Nablus. According to the reports, a 14-year-old Palestinian at the checkpoint pulled out a knife and tried to stab 2 reservist soldiers. He was shot and killed. In a different report, a Palestinian from Karwat Bani Hassan, which is also near Nablus, was shot and killed following a raid of settlers into the village. The report started coming in from the Palestinian Wafa news network, and it was later confirmed with photo identification analyzed by the Israeli news network Haaretz. According to reports, settlers raided the area and torched a home and a car, and in confrontation that ensued, shot and killed 1 Palestinian. The IDF responded to this, stating that reports came in regarding confrontations between settlers and Palestinians. The IDF arrived at the scene and dispersed the area, noting that 4 Palestinians were injured and 1 Israeli was injured. In addition, there was substantial IDF activity reported in the Nablus and Yatta area, as well as in the Sabah al-Khir village and the El-Bira village. In the different areas, weapons were confiscated, and in Yatta, a weapons laboratory was also dismantled, and substantial confrontations occurred between Palestinians and the IDF. According to reports, a total of 7 Palestinians were arrested in the last 24 hours, and 2 Palestinians were killed. One is that 14-year-old Palestinian from the attack at the checkpoint, and the other is a 38-year-old Palestinian from a settler attack in Karwat Bani Hassan. Moving on to the north of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, there were continuous mortars and rockets that were fired from the southern parts of Lebanon into Israel today. Mortars targeted the Shomra area in the western Galilee, and there were specific mortar barrages against different IDF outposts. The IDF retaliated with aerial attacks against various targets of Hezbollah and artillery attacks towards the launching sites of the mortars. Hezbollah stated today that another one of its operatives have been killed, citing the number 89 as the number of Hezbollah operatives that were killed since the war began. This is substantially lower than what Defense Minister Gallant had previously stated. Already several weeks ago, he stated that over 100 Hezbollah operatives have been killed, so unclear how many of them at this time. Regarding the attack that I reported yesterday in Syria, it was an attack that was carried out southern parts of Damascus. Usually this is against weapons transfers. Iranian state media today reported that 2 members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard were killed in Israel's attack in Syria. So presumably they were in charge of either some sort of weapons trafficking or some sort of logistical organizations. Israel has made no comments. Moving on to the regional developments, the U.S. Central Command today reported that an Iranian drone was intercepted in the Persian Gulf by U.S. aircrafts after flying, I'm quoting, in an unsafe and unprofessional manner. In addition, regarding the explosions that occurred in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen that is controlled by the Houthis, the attack was attributed to Israel. The Houthis then put out statements both in Arabic and in Hebrew that the attack was not carried out by Israel. Today, the IDF spokesperson was asked about this and pretty much alluded the subject, but also implied that it was actually not an Israeli attack. And right now, different media sources are starting to suggest that it is possible a rival organization in Yemen, specifically the rivals of the Houthis that are in the port of Aden, that may have carried out the attack. So right now, it is still unclear. Moving on to some of the political and general trends that occurred in the last 24 hours, the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, spoke to U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, and he stated that Israel's offensive is going to complicate negotiations, specifically citing that there was a possibility to have a breakthrough and bleed that truce into another truce, but the Israeli offensive now is making that impossible. In other news, UN organizations for Women's Empowerment and Equality published a condemnation of Hamas's sexual violence on October 7th, nearly 2 months after the attack. This has been a specific source of diplomatic strife. Israeli organizations have repeatedly criticized UN bodies and specifically women's organizations for not condemning Hamas for the sexual violence on October 7th. That condemnation did come out now nearly 2 months after the attack. In Israel, the response was pretty much dismissing and saying that the condemnation is far too weak and far too late. Other news, French President Macron is due to arrive in Qatar to help facilitate extending a ceasefire. The report said extending a ceasefire, however, by now it would be negotiating a new ceasefire, adding that Israel needs to define the goals of the war better, since destroying Hamas will take 10 years. In other news, under Turkish mediation, 4 Hamas operatives who were arrested in Libya in 2016 for weapons trafficking and trying to smuggle money and coordinate between different organizations for Hamas have been released, according to the report, as a result of Erdogan's personal intervention. They then traveled to Turkey and since then to Qatar. Other news coming out of Israel, the head of the United Arab List, which is one of Israel's political parties, Mansour Abbas, gave an interview to CNN. In it, he stated, and I'm quoting, "In order to move forward, armed Palestinian organizations need to lay down arms. They need to work hand in hand with the Palestinian Authority to build a national movement that will create a Palestinian state and peace with Israel." This is the first time that one of the political parties that claims to represent the Arab-Palestinian Israeli minority has explicitly said that Palestinian organizations need to lay down arms, and he specifically said, looking back historically, the use of violence to achieve a Palestinian state has always failed, leading to scores of deaths on the Palestinian side. His statements came under substantial condemnation from different Palestinian media and political sources, and after this he put out clarification stating, and I'm quoting, "The Palestinian state that will be established will be the one to dismantle the armed units." In other words, trying to clarify that he's not saying that the units need to disarm first, but in fact that a state needs to be established and then the armed units would need to disband. Moving on to speculations regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, Mark Regev, who is Prime Minister Netanyahu's spokesperson, reiterated today the possibility of a buffer zone to be created between Israel and the Gaza Strip, and he stated Israel will not allow Hamas fighters to be on the border anymore. In addition, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris stated today at the climate conference in Dubai that she is in contact with Egyptian President Assisi regarding the day-after plans. She also stated that Israel must respect international humanitarian law and that too many innocent Palestinians have died in the Gaza Strip, and she presented a vision for the day after. According to this vision, Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip must be reunited under one leadership, and that unity must have a clear political vision and strengthened security capabilities in order to provide security both for Israel and the Palestinians and lead towards a future Palestinian state. So once again, what Kamala Harris is stating as far as the United States is concerned, who has to take over the Gaza Strip in the future has to be either the Palestinian Authority or some sort of new political entity, but that will include the Palestinian Authority or the political establishment, both of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, in order to reunite them and march the Palestinians towards a future Palestinian state. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.